Hey everyone, welcome. Just give people a few minutes to join us. Hey June, welcome. Nice to see you here. Hello. Just going to give people a few minutes to join us. Wonderful to see you. Glad you're with us. We have just a couple of minutes to go before we start. We'll just let people come on in. Could someone write in the chat if you can hear me okay? Does it sound okay? Yes? Just a sound check. Good morning. Sounds okay? Good. We'll give people just one more minute before we start to join us. Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. If you're joining us from the United States or Europe, good morning. If you're here in Asia, if you don't know me, I'm Annelise Riles. I edit the Everyday Ambassador podcast and Substack here, and I'm just so happy that you are here for our monthly Ask Me Anything discussion session. Welcome, welcome. So glad you're here. This is a chance to have a conversation. So please put your comments in the chat, your ideas, your thoughts, your questions. Want to get as much discussion as we can, because that's really the point of this session. So, here at Everyday Ambassador, all month, we've been talking about the theme of amateurs and amateurism. It may seem like a strange topic for a Substack that's devoted to peace and borders and global affairs. Why amateurs? Well, amateurs are in the news a lot now because expertise is under attack when it comes to diplomacy and law. A lot of people think, the experts are part of the problem. On the other hand, there is also a lot of defense of experts happening, and people feeling like they have to explain why expertise is important. And of course, expertise is important. I'm a law professor. I believe that deeply that it's important. But I think this is also a really great opportunity for us to think a little bit about the role that non experts play. And sometimes non experts are precisely the ones who bring new perspectives and energy and just the thinking that the world needs in moments of deep change. And it's also a chance for all of us to lean into our role in issues where we may think, well, that's not for me. I'll leave that to the experts. But this is a space in which we can begin to ask, well, what could be my role? Even though I don't have the PhD or what have you, could I have a role to play in the issue? So that's what we're talking about today. So as I mentioned in the post that I shared this month, the word amateur comes from the Latin amare, which means to love. So the root of the word amateur is love. And really, the idea is doing something out of love. Whenever you do something for the love of it, you're acting as an amateur. I think it's a wonderful idea to think about all the places in which we act purely out of the love of the craft, of the activity, of the other people that we encounter in that space. That's what amateurism is really about, as opposed to, say, if you like, doing something purely to earn a living or to develop professionally or to network or any of that, right? It's a different idea. Um, I talked a little bit in the post for this month about a comment I heard from a lot of you, which was, boy, I would love to do amateur work. I have something I'm really passionate about, whether it's my art or writing a novel or being more involved in social issues in my community or what have you. I'd love to do all that. But I can't afford it, or I feel like I can't afford it, or I worry about the financial consequences. And so I wrote a post about that, um, and I talked a little bit about my own decision this month, over the past year, to just try to experiment to see whether it was really necessary to have everything that I thought that I needed to live. And of course, I discovered that that wasn't the case at all. That it didn't make any difference to my happiness. On the contrary, that really releasing myself from that sense that I had to do this or that because of the financial dimensions gave me a freedom to do things that I loved, and more importantly, to ask a really difficult question, which is, what do I love? I think sometimes we can lose that question in the conversation about, oh, I have to do this. I should do this uh, because it's professionally the best thing to do. Really, to sort of ask myself the question of what I love. So, interested to know what you all think or have experience with that as well. So, let's see. We have a question from Toby. Toby says, this isn't exactly about peace building, but what I'm most curious about is about your morning writing practice. And if you approach your writing in those moments as an amateur and what that looks like, how you stay in the mindset, writing out of love rather than getting caught up in thinking about what you will produce. Oh my God, what a great question, Toby. I love that. I love that. I'm interested to hear about your experience too, because I know you're writing a book at the moment. So I'm eager to hear about that. So I wake up first thing in the morning and do, the kind of the traditional morning pages idea, which is just to write whatever I want to write for, 3 pages and see what comes out. And honestly, Toby, one of the joys of this year, giving myself this year, was I said, my luxury is going to be that I'm going to let that time be as long as I want. I'm not going to say, oh my goodness, I have to run because it's time to be somewhere else. If I want to keep writing, just whatever is coming to my mind, I'm going to do it. And the first 3 months that I was on leave this year, I filled, I think, 10 notebooks, like just writing and writing and writing, pages and pages. And you know what? A lot of really valuable stuff came out of that. I mean, really valuable stuff. And slowly, it suddenly dawned on me, wait, this is the work. Like I thought I was doing this, amateur stuff on the side, but actually the big ideas came out of that space. And I think that's really fascinating to me. It's almost kind of like magic or miraculous that at those moments at which we think we're not doing something productive, it turns up to be the very thing that the world needs and that we need, that healing ourselves and healing the world at the same time. So, what about you, Toby? I'm interested to know. Oh, you say, wow, I hope that I can do that during my sabbatical. Yes, absolutely. I hope you enjoy. I want to keep it going now. Absolutely. So welcome, Jeannie. So good to see you as well. Delighted. Kitty, welcome to you also. So, one of the things that I shared in the podcast was about the role that amateurs are playing in many issues in the world now that we don't really get noticed, like the role that amateur sleuths are playing in, solving crimes or especially cybersecurity issues. Now, even the experts in cyber are doing all kinds of hackathons and activities to try to draw the amateurs in because they've discovered that the amateurs have ways of thinking that are precisely outside the box of expertise. It's what the world needs. It's just a small example that we can all relate to, but I think it's true in whatever field we're practicing in. So I'm interested to know, for those of you who identify as experts, whether you're lawyers or professors or what have you, where do you think there could be room for a little more amateur perspective in our work? And for those of you who identify more as, not experts, where do you think you could step up and say, I have a right to participate and I have something to contribute in this space? I think that's what we could maybe talk about today. So maybe as an icebreaker, I'll just put a question out there. What's one thing that in your life right now that you're allowing yourself to be bad at on purpose? What's one thing that you're saying, I don't have to be great at this and I still get to do it? My grandmother used to say, I used to love it. She used to say, the woods would be very quiet if the only birds who sang were those who sang the very best. And I always thought that's great. Exactly. Right. So, where is there a space for us to do something badly on purpose? One of the comments this month on the post was from Gio, who's, by the way, going to be our speaker in the next Everyday Ambassador Salon. Gio, wonderful former executive on in Silicon Valley, who has made a choice to leave that behind and now has all kinds of amateur pursuits, including writing a novel. And he said, the hardest thing for him wasn't leaving the job, it was letting go of the critical voice that said, "Who am I kidding? I can't do that. I'm not qualified to do that." And really to just stay with the kernel of an idea waiting to develop. Those are his words. And I thought that was such a powerful concept idea. It's not really sometimes leaving what we're expert that's hard at. It's saying, you know what, I'm gonna let myself be in this space where I may not think that I'm good enough to do it yet. Toby says, what where Toby is allowing herself to not be an expert, to be bad at something is in drawing and playing with color. Oh my God, I love that, Toby. I love it so much. I too, my mother-in-law was a painter, is a painter. And she's gone into an assisted facility, and I've been cleaning up her house, and I discovered all of her supplies. And I was gonna like throw all the stuff out, and I thought, wait a minute, who says I can't use this? Why couldn't I try to use this? So, Toby, you and I are going to like do this together. Like, why not? I just love it. Let's see it. Let's just be really bad at playing with color together. I think that sounds amazing and really fun, right? Um, Welcome, everyone. Welcome. You're joining us. I'm so happy that you're here. Um, we were talking about amateurs and the power of an amateur mindset in whatever creative or political or passion work we do. And there's really two pieces to this. One piece is if you're an expert, kind of thinking about where you can be a little bit more of an amateur, allowing yourself some space to play. And the second, and or where you might be more open to amateur coming into the conversation and making a space at the table for them. And the flip side is where you're not an expert, say where you could step up and see the contribution that you could make. So, we had some really interesting comments this month that I want to share. One was from Grace, another member of our salon. And Grace is has for 20 years been a family court mediator. So she does really hard, difficult work in her daily life, dealing with families that are falling apart and being the mediator on behalf of the court. And she said that her amateur work right now is to think about what it means. She said to age with clarity. That, one of the things she's seen in her work as a family court mediator is the issue of illness and death and inheritance and all of the family issues that come around aging, and that she wants to find a way to grow old without delusion, she said, and to prepare, for eventual death, which is what comes to all of us. I thought this was just such an interesting idea. I hadn't even thought about that, but I really thought that Grace's comment really kind of pulls together all kinds of things we've been talking about for the last 4 months: listening, the power of listening, listening to yourself, hosting you and others in conversations, slicing problems down to size, and now thinking about what it means to be an amateur. And so, Grace is thinking about what it would be like to devote the second half of life to other kinds of issues beyond status, beyond prestige, beyond profession. I think that's really inspiring and raises kind of the larger existential questions that could be in something as simple as being an amateur. Jeannie says, yes, aging with clarity is very powerful. Absolutely. Jeannie comments here that I'm not good at taking time for myself rather than going on to my next task. I keep working on it. Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting, Jeannie, that you point out that, being an amateur, that meaning not just focusing on the time value of money and what I need to do to get where I need to be, but enjoying the love of the moment can be its own kind of practice. I really like that, the time dimension of this topic. Um, uh, we had another post, another comment from Jay, and I just want to take a moment and sit with Jay's comment because I think it's really important. So, Jay is in a different life situation. They are without a job right now, without professional work because they're sick, okay, and they're dealing with an illness. And that's really hard and a very different situation from someone who chooses to put their work aside. And I would just want to raise this because, there is, I I think, something we need to acknowledge that if we have the choice to be an amateur in some space in our lives, that's a luxury and an incredible gift and something wonderful. But not everyone has that choice all the time. And some people find themselves forced out of work by circumstance, whether it's physical circumstance or other things. And, the literary critic Marjorie Garber, who's a professor at Harvard, wrote a book about amateurs in which she talked about the fact there's a class issue that it used to be, in the 19th century, the 18th century, that being an amateur was what, a nobleman did. It meant that, if you had time to play tennis and do all these things, it meant that you didn't have to work for a living, and that it was the opposite of being a worker. And so that we need to sometimes think about the fact that there is a class dimension to this. However, I also think that there's space for all of us to reclaim that autonomy. Even Jay, in some space, talks about that they can find a space to turn a situation that is perhaps not chosen into one that is chosen by thinking of it in this way. So thank you, Jay, for sharing that. Let's see. I Please feel free to share other thoughts. Interested to know, what you all how this topic resonates with you this month, where you're thinking that it applies in your own life, if it does, where you get tripped up or you think maybe it's not the right thing for you. Interested in what is on your mind. Um, um, uh, I'll tell you a little bit about how I came to this topic. So it's kind of puzzling, perhaps. I came to this topic because I spent 10 years studying lawyers in the financial markets. So you would think it's the exact opposite of anything about amateurs and art and what have you, right? These are hard nosed lawyers who work very, very long hours uh, doing financial transactions that are just really about money. Okay. And what I discovered was that even in this space, the most kind of market professional space you could imagine, people would say to me, lawyers would say to me, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm doing this work because this bank wants it and my client wants it. And blah. But let me tell you about this really interesting idea I have for a new argument or how we could change the law." And they would go off in this direction with all this passion about something that was like kind of connected to their work, but kind of off on a tangent enough that it wasn't like something they could bill a client for. But that was the thing they really wanted to talk about. And I had one star research subject in particular, this lawyer named Saito, a Japanese lawyer. And he would work really long hours. He would get to the office at 8 and he would work until 8 for his clients. And then he would take time, like writing this manual about how to do really difficult transactions that hardly ever came up. But that was his passion project. And next thing you know, this manual started getting shared around, but in the industry, and everyone wanted a copy in case they ever had a transaction like this. This guy had made a checklist, so why not use it? And then people started getting together and having these like late night, like research sessions, they called it, where they kind of pretended to be academics researching the questions. And it just became their passion project. And they didn't even tell their clients or bosses about it because it just wasn't even something that had value in the market. But over time, even government officials started to ask them questions. Saito wrote a book, which at first was just kind of like a checklist book, a manual. It's now in like its like 35th printing or something. It's like one of the best known books in financial law. He's become this like superstar in the industry. And all this because he dared to do a little bit of amateur work, to look sideways, to find what he loved and to make a space for it. And I don't want to suggest that, we should do this in order to be successful like him. I mean, of course, if that had been his goal, he never would have gotten there. I knew him when he was still like on book version, printing number one, and people didn't really know him yet. And in fact, at one point, he had to leave the bank that he was working for because they had a merger and they were going to assign him to some other work, and he just really wanted to stick with his passion work. So he had to find a smaller, less prestigious bank where there was still a place for somebody who wanted to do the thing that he was passionate about. So he had to make some really difficult choices and compromises in his career to protect his passion, his love. But I found that really inspiring. And then the more I looked at it, the more I saw that the best lawyers that I studied were always doing that. They were always looking sideways. They were mixing things up. And then I realized it wasn't just lawyers. Like I discovered this doctor at my research university at Northwestern, most well-known cardiologist, super famous, but he got interested. The way I got to know him was because he got interested in why are so many people dying of cardiac disease in Africa? And then he started to realize, well, does it have to do with food? Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe it also has to do with like, well, where does the food come from? And then he started to realize, well, he kind of needed to be a kind of amateur anthropologist to solve this medical problem. And then he had to know a little bit about the politics of Africa, and he had to learn about the history. And most of what he had to say about those things to a professional anthropologist or a historian might seem kind of like, not quite professional, like quite like he really knew what he was talking about. But he didn't care because his attitude was, I want to learn about this because I'm interested and it may help my work to look sideways. So that's kind of how I got into how professionals need to be amateurs to be good professionals, if that makes sense. That's a different question from the question of how those of us who are not professionals can contribute to political and social issues and have a voice. And I really see that now, in global affairs. We just had this week in the news, we had a number of elections locally in the United States. We had the issue in my field of international law of the mayor of New York, Mamdani, stating that he, in his opinion, the president of Israel is a war criminal and should be arrested. And, I think most professional foreign policy folks, their reaction to that is, who are you to make that judgment? You're not a professional. But he's reflecting the voice of his constituency, which is saying it's no longer just up to the professional foreign policy experts to make these decisions. We want to have a voice in that as well. So I think we're seeing that social change where on on both the right and the left, people feel that they have a right to have a voice in formally expert issues. Um, let's see. Well, what other tell me what else is on your mind? Interested to know how what kinds of amateur activities you're engaging in, how you're making space for those things, what tensions you're seeing, in finding this space, or what comes up for you. What are the biggest challenges? Interested to know. Please feel free to comment. Um, as a lawyer, one of the spaces in American law where we really do make space for amateurs is in our jury system. It's kind of an interesting system. The idea that there would be a space where people who are not professionally trained get to make the most important decisions. And I know that June is on this call. And so, June, I'm going to embarrass you and share a story that you shared with me because it was so powerful to me. So, June is a lawyer in Japan. And when she was an exchange student, she traveled to the United States. And because she was studying law, she went to a courthouse and there was a jury trial happening, and the selection process for a jury was taking place, and she watched this. And then the jurors went on break, and she walked up to them. And by the way, the more I think about this, June, I just think you're awesome. I think it's amazing that you did this. But she walked up to these potential jurors, and she said to them, like, well, I want to know, like, don't you think like that you don't really know enough about the law to have an opinion? And isn't it scary to like, wouldn't you rather not be involved in this? Because um, you know, you don't know anything. This, of course, is at a time when Japan didn't have a jury system. Now they have one. And one of the jurors said to June, first of all, we don't decide the law, we decide the facts. And the facts are something that any person can have an opinion about and understand. And secondly, it's part of being a citizen to make a commitment to actually making decisions. And I just thought, what a powerful statement, right? About both the space for amateurism. It's not the law, that's for the experts. It's the facts, that's for ordinary folks to decide as much as anybody else. And secondly, that there's a dimension of citizenship about being an amateur and leaning into your amateurism. And so, June, I just want to thank you for sharing that story with me because it's really kind of touched me and stayed with me ever since we talked about it. Okay, Toby. Toby shares, you feel like you have no space. The only book manuscripts edits which are due next week. My biggest friction is finding that time space right now, but I'd love to hear more about allowing ourselves to be bad at something. Um, anyone else have experiences allowing yourselves to be bad at something or on purpose? Or leaning into being willing to fall, to fail. I'll tell you, for me right now, this is it. Participating in this conversation with all of you is not my professional expertise, but I love being with you. I just love it. And so I want to do it even though I'm kind of like flailing. And so I think that's an example for me, Toby, of kind of broadening my horizon a little bit and sort of looking sideways like Saito did to be a little bit of an amateur. But I get, that sometimes it's hard to find the space when you've got edits due next week. Maybe you can block out some space for some playtime after this book goes in, and we'll all celebrate your book manuscript being in because it's amazing. And eager to have you on to talk about that as well. Um, let's see. What else could we talk about? I am writing a book right now about what I'm calling gig diplomacy, which is really about the power of amateurs in diplomacy itself and how the whole world in which global affairs gets done. It used to be a tiny group of experts who only talk to each other, but now, partly through the power of platforms like this one, it's a space where, really kind of local groups and people with all kinds of interests can be loosely connected and have as much of an impact as what goes on inside the UN headquarters. And the UN and these old institutions are really struggling to come to terms with the fact that they're not in charge anymore. It's all this amateur work all around the world connecting up in loose ways that's actually producing the insights and the values and the norms, and the institutions and the experts follow. And one way of saying this is that culture leads and law follows. And so try to think about that. It's also important for those of us who are training experts, like I am as a law professor, to really prepare them for a world in which they're not in charge anymore. That there's room for the citizens to have more of a place as well. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about nuclear issues, this we're ramping up now to getting close to the anniversary of the bombings of Fukushima and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. um, I do have a little self-guided course that is available to all of my members, which has so much material in there. I put a ton of work into it. It's interviews with amazing scholars and activists and survivors. It's reading lists. It's videos from different spaces that I've created. Just a whole bunch of amazing material, the kinds of things I would share with love with my best law students. And I sort of put it together in a format that you can use on your own and just work through on your own as you like, and also movies to watch and other things. And, in a few weeks, you could just really have a lot of fun learning about this subject and emerging with like a really strong foundation to really be your own voice in this space. So commend that to you as well. Let's see. Other thoughts? Please share what else is going on. Jeannie asks, where can we find it? Jeannie, that is, I will text you afterwards, but it's a perk. If you know, in Substack, there's something called perks. It's a perk for all my subscribers, my paid subscribers, and which you're one. So you can access that as well. And if you, I'll try to pull the link out and post it in the comments after this video goes live. Also, for those of you who can't see it now. Okay, June has a thought. Thank you, Annelise, for remembering my comment the other day and sharing it in this program. The woman jury candidate also said, "That's democracy. We people decide." Yeah. And I was so impressed to know that in the US, the idea of democracy is really strongly rooted in the society, which was not the case in Japan. Well, that was more than 30 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that democracy, June, to this woman evidently meant her right to have a voice, even though she wasn't an expert lawyer in something as significant as, a criminal trial. I mean, I do think that's a really, really important dimension of democracy that we need to preserve and value, right? And so, thank you for commenting on that. And of course, now Japan has a jury system. June, I'm interested to know how you think that's working, or whether you think it is working well. But I also want to say, June, that when I reflected back on you telling me this story, what I thought was just how brave you were as an amateur. You were just an exchange student, and you marched up to a courthouse and went in there and found a seat, and then marched out and like started talking to people. Even though many people would say, "Well, I couldn't do that," or I don't know enough," or "I shouldn't go in there. It's not my space." And you were willing to really be that amateur and to say, I have something to learn here. I'm passionate about it. I'm going to go in that space. And I just thought that was really inspiring and the kind of spirit of this community. So thank you for doing that. And then as a result, we all got the insight that you had to share from it. Um, Okay, Toby raises a really interesting point. On the other hand, the amateurs running the show in the US government aren't doing such a great job for us. Yeah, okay. Toby, I'm so glad you raised this. So, yes. So, the other piece of this, though, that Toby is raising is the point that, wait a minute, first of all, don't we need expertise in some space? So, in my field of international law and diplomacy, for example, it's absolutely clear that the in the negotiations between the Trump administration and the government of Iran, the government of Iran diplomats ate the U.S.'s Trump administration folks' lunch because they were amateurs. They didn't know anything about diplomacy, and the Iranians are really skilled at diplomacy. They've studied it. They have a really great process for passing expertise from one generation to the next. They knew what they were doing, and the Americans didn't. And so that's an example of a space in which we need expertise, as Toby points out. And certainly, when I go to the doctor, I want to speak to an expert. When I drive across a bridge, I want to know that it was made by an engineer who knows what they're doing, right? So we need spaces for expertise. Absolutely. But Toby, I would say, and I'm really interested in what you think here, I would say part of the pushback that we're seeing now and the populism that we're seeing is, in every lie, there's a kernel of truth, right? And there's a kind of a a pushback against the fact that the experts became too arrogant, and that our world as experts became too small, and that there wasn't the voice for that woman that June met who said, wait, democracy is about me having a voice as well. And so what we really need is a kind of partnership between experts and amateurs in which each respects the space of the other. We understand that, for example, how the bridge is constructed should be left to the engineers, but whether there should be a bridge in the first place or how broad it should be is something that citizens should have a voice in, for example, right? That there's room for both perspectives, and that we kind of lost that a little bit. And as a result, now the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. If we're going to bring it back, we're going to have to find a space for folks to have a voice, but also for all of us to be creative by getting out of our lane a little bit. It's not just about politics, it's also about innovation, where that comes from. So I don't know, Toby, interested what you think about that. Just completely agree with you. Let's see, what else can I share here? I'll tell you a little bit about just what's going on in my life. So, this month was a huge month for me because I moved to Nagasaki. It's been something that I've been thinking about. Many of you know I've been writing about for a long time. The decision finally to do that was a really big one for me. And we have a tiny new home, which just feels like heaven on earth at the edge of the water in a tiny village about 45 minutes north of Nagasaki called Kinkai, where I'm going to invite all of you and hope that we can do lots of amazing things together there. It's in a sense, a kind of a paradise of a kind, like something. If you've seen a Miyazaki film, I just keep singing the Totoro song because it's like that's where I live, in the middle of beautiful rice fields and fruit and um, local farmers and fisher people, and that's kind of it. And anyway, the other night, on the subject of amateurism, I heard this sound like people yelling and cheering, and I thought, "What's going on?" So I started walking, and I saw the lights, and there was this tiny little baseball field in the distance, and I walked over there, and the entire town was there. Like with the entire town not being that many people. I mean, nice for the people I recognize. I recognize the woman who makes cakes and the butcher and some of the farmers and the people that I knew. Of the people I had met in this town, everyone was there. And they were out playing baseball, and they were terrible, like, some of them were, like, 60 years old, and they could hardly throw the ball, and they were laughing, and they were just having the time of their life, and everyone was cheering, and I just thought, it was this in the summer heat, they had the lights on this, like, old dirt baseball field with, like, weeds growing up, and everyone was just having a blast, and I thought, wow, like these people, like you see the power of something as simple as amateur sports to bring people together and just the joy of it. So I want to join that softball team. I really want to join that softball team. That's all I'd say. So keep you posted on that. So Toby says, I agree. What I've been thinking about a lot lately is how we always tend to see only one way as the right answer rather than being comfortable with duality. No kidding, Toby. Completely agree. And your work in this space is so important, thinking about conflict resolution and the fact that we often shut down into one perspective instead of being curious and recognizing that there are many ways of seeing the same issue. I really appreciate that. And I think one of the ways to be curious is to be willing to be an amateur, right? I mean, I think that's one of the reasons this skill is significant. Um, um, Absolutely, completely agree with that. Um, let's see. Other uh thoughts people may have. Anything else on your mind as you're thinking about where you can be an amateur or what you're an expert in and how amateurs play a role in that expertise? Interested to know what you're thinking about. Um, uh, Well, the other thing that I'm being an amateur at right now, Toby, in response to your question about the arts, I am enjoying being an amateur at Japanese cooking. That is something I'm really an amateur in. I've never been a cook. I'm a professional woman. It's not my thing, but I bought these robots, Japanese cooking robots. That's all I can describe them. I am now an amateur robot manager. The robots cook things, and I'm having so much fun, like buying vegetables from these local farmers, asking them what you do with them, putting them in these like pots that do the work on their own, and just trying to cook Japanese food. And I'm sure I'm terrible at it, and nobody would ever want to eat my Japanese food, but I am having a blast. So that's my little amateur activity. Toby says, yes, which is maybe also the difference with US government folks. I would not characterize them as curious exactly, right? Exactly. Absolutely. 100%. On the contrary, not curious in the least and not empathetic and not willing to look sideways. On the contrary, right? It's like the worst of two worlds, anti expert and narrow like experts. Absolutely. Completely agree. Um, let's see. I, we are getting close to time, but I wanted to mention that we have a wonderful group. If you're interested, some folks on this call are part of it, called our salon. And it's just a phenomenal group of folks from around the world who are looking sideways, doing all kinds of, being interested in one another and having really, really truthful and creative and fun conversations. We don't have one political or social viewpoint. We are curious about all perspectives. And the format is that like as if it were a salon in my living room. Every month, somebody from the group offers up something that they're working on, whether it's a piece of creative work or a professional project or academic work, and we all kind of dig in and enjoy it, and it's a lot of fun. So that's something that if you're interested, would encourage you to think about joining us. I think that people have used words about the group like life changing, and I certainly feel it's been that way for me because it's just inspiring to be around such wonderful folks, and the kinds of intensive conversations that we're having are something that is hard to find space for in our divided world in which we're not curious, as Toby says. So, this is a group for the curious. So, encourage you to think about that. Um, let's see. Sean says, best English language cookbook we found is Japanese Cooking, a Simple Art by Shizuo Tsuji. Sean, I guess you are an amateur cook as well. This is good to know. It's something I did not know about you. So I'm excited to know more about what you're trying there. Um, Maybe that's something we can do together at some point. Um, Wonderful. Okay. So just one last thing about the salon. If you're not sure it's for you, there is the option to join us just one time and kind of meet folks and try it out. And just DM me, or I'll put a link here if I can pull it off. Let's see if I can get it. A link for folks to sign up if you'd like to just check it out. That's so wonderful. So next month, very connected to what we're talking about this month, we're going to spend the whole month talking about the power of play. The power of play. And again, not something that a lot of professionals talk about, but when you dig in the practices, the real life practices of the very best experts, I find, whether we're talking about scientists or the best lawyers or politicians, there's a spirit of play and an ability to a willingness to fail in a playful way that's really at the core of the practice. So we're going to be talking about the power of play in peace building and boundary crossing and connecting across our differences, because that's a space where I think it's really important. It allows us to bring the politics down, bring the tensions down, and approach one another in a way that allows us to find commonalities. I really believe that. I've seen it work a million times, and we're going to be talking about how to do it. So that's all month next month. And we'll have another live like this in the third week of the month. So look for that as well. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join. If there's anything I could do for you to support your work, please DM me. I am here for you. You matter to me. And I'm grateful for what each of you is doing. So have a wonderful evening, and stay in touch. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone. Bye.